while everyone's answering, I want to quickly just give a list of who our panelists are today. We have Dana Godek, who is Manager of Policy and Research at the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Nick Mathern, who's the Vice President for K-12 Partnerships at Achieving the Dream. And Issa Ellis, who is Senior Program Officer for the U.S. Program of Education at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So thank you everyone for answering our poll. And now I will go into a little bit of the format and how things are going to go today. So this event will start with a panel discussion facilitated by myself and our three speakers. It will then be followed by about 15 minutes in breakout rooms that you can interact with each other and with the speakers to digest the information shared and brainstorm next steps. Each group will have the opportunity to share out to all attendees. So definitely encourage you to assign a speaker who's not the facilitator, hopefully. Through each phase, we hope that you will gain a more in-depth understanding of the principal's focus, aspirations, and challenges, learn promising practices being pursued at the national, state, and local level to advance this principle, as well as manageable short and long-term next steps to take back to your organization. And again, questions are encouraged to be added through the chat throughout. Now let's move on from all the event logistics and talk about what we're all here for, which is the new vision for CTE. I know some of you hopefully are repeat visitors to our Lunch and Learn series, but for those that this is your first one, Without Limits, a shared vision for the future of career technical education was unveiled in March and is supported by over 40 national organizations. Its 5 principles and 5 foundational commitments are anchored in the belief that each learner must have access to and the means to succeed in the career of their choice, and that CTE is the catalyst for a transformed and interconnected career preparation ecosystem at all policy levels that removes systemic barriers to equitable access and outcomes. What makes this vision so powerful is the focus on shared commitment and action, which started in the ideation process of the vision through the CTE Forward Summit last fall, and it continues today with these types of events and with our video blog series, which I hope you will check out after this event as well, which covers our foundational commitments. It's also the focus on the learner that makes this vision really powerful. Each principle centers the learner as the first 2 words, and equity at the center of all suggested actions and desired outcomes from the vision work. We know that the realization of this vision will be long and challenging, but the work starts with constructive and consistent conversations like the ones that we're having today. So as I mentioned before, today's session is going to focus on Principle 3. Each learner skillfully navigates their own career journey. This principle is rooted in expanding capacity for interconnected advising systems and wraparound supports that ultimately provide seamless, accessible guidance to learners at all stages of their career journey. There's 3 action areas that are identified in this principle. 1, offer integrated pre-K to 20 advisement systems. Provide transparent and accessible cross-state data on CTE options and outcomes, and invest necessary resources to support integrated advisement systems. And I wanted to take just a minute to point out a couple words that stand out to me in this principle before we delve into the discussion. The first word is own. No other principle has that word, and I think it's pretty powerful. It speaks to the deeply personal ownership that a career has for an individual, and the intent of this principle to make and keep the learner's voice heard from the very start of their education journey all the way through. The other is skilled. Ultimately, integrated and informed advising should lead to learners and families, which we can't forget about them, making more informed decisions about their learning path. And we hope that CTE should be a natural choice and seen as a valuable experience to achieve career success. However, we know that there's barriers to that right now. There's a lack of awareness about CTE because a lack of advising support, or there's outdated perceptions about what CTE offers. We also have to be mindful of CTE's past and that impact on the perception, particularly among historically marginalized communities, about what CTE offers. And advising systems must be designed to build trust and equity with these learners and their families so that CTE can reach everyone. Advanced CTE recently refreshed national research about messages and messengers for CTE that resonate. And I'm happy to say that school counselors are found to be in the top 2 messengers for getting out information about CTE across gender, race, and ethnicity. So that's strongly connected to advising. And so we're going to delve into the principle today to just explore how we can leverage advising systems and help each learner get on their path to career success. With that in mind, let's jump into our panel. Each of the speakers will briefly introduce themselves and share what this principle means to them. So thank you all again for your participation today. And I'll start with Nick Mathern from Achieving the Dream.
Not muted. Thanks, Stacy. I really appreciate it, and I'm certainly glad to be here today. Hopefully many of you are familiar with Achieving the Dream, although I saw that we've got a lot of folks representing secondary ed in the room, so it might not be as familiar. But Achieving the Dream is a national organization supporting more than 300 colleges, supporting mainly community colleges around the country. And we work with colleges on a student success agenda and helping colleges to achieve equitable outcomes for students, particularly low-income students and students of color, and ensuring that colleges, in fact, are helping our students and communities to achieve post-secondary education outcomes that will lead them into meaningful and family wage careers. One of the many things that Achieving the Dream does is support a network of Gateway to College programs. And Gateway to College is a program that uses early college strategies to serve students who have struggled in high school. So students who dropped out of high school or are not on track to graduate. And so we've got a partnership with K-12 school districts and colleges in 30 communities around the country. And these programs are an innovative early college model that's specifically working with students who are vulnerable or unlikely to get to post-secondary education on their own. Stacey, did you want me to say a bit more about the?
Sure, just to share real quick why I support the vision in general.
Okay, all right. I didn't know how to say that. We're doing introductions around the room. Sorry. So the vision without limits is very much aligned with Achieving the Dream's overall mission, and in this particular principle, really does sit with where we look at our what is innovative about the early college programs that we serve, which is really based on developing personalized relationships with students and giving students an opportunity to be supported in order to then begin to explore their post-secondary education journeys. And so this particular principle really resonates with us because the holistic student support is a crucial part of helping particularly students who may be facing other barriers in their life to both access and be successful in post-secondary ed.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Nick. Dana, I'll go to you next.
Thanks, Stacy. I'm really honored to be here with Nick and Isa, particularly just because we had, as you might imagine, some pre-conversation leading up to this lunch and learn. So I'm looking forward to continuing to learn right now. I don't know how much lunching I'm doing, but definitely delighted that Principle 3 explicitly calls out social emotional learning. And so we're grateful to Advanced CTE for continuing to uphold the notion of agency and belonging, and really explicitly acknowledging that social emotional learning, or SEL, is the process, of course, by which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes they need to manage their emotions, sustain positive pro-social relationships, and I would argue make responsible caring decisions, responsible career decisions. So to your opening remarks, Stacy, really underscoring ownership and skill within that space, particularly within the advising space, is something that we at CASEL care deeply about and are learning more and more about from states that we are collaborating with You mentioned in the introduction that I work with the Collaborating States Initiative as part of CASEL, and I get the honor of working with 8 states, some of whom I see are represented here today. So I want to give a big shout out to Team North Dakota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and I'll hopefully get a chance to underscore some really fantastic work from some of the other states that we've been working in a focused community of practice with, to really connect the dots between career advisement, social emotional learning, student agency, and organizing that under the really great way that A Life Without Limits describes it, right? So the whole learner is at the center of all of these elements. And we believe that SEL informed advising gets us there, right? It helps us build up a sense of agency. We certainly highly prize school counselors and career advisors that are working directly with children, particularly children and families from underrepresented communities, and helping work through the development of competencies and skills that lead to highly successful post-secondary life. And they'll find useful in their careers, but also in the broader satisfaction of their life experience. So we are excited to understand this through a career and technical ed framework, and to be learning alongside these great states, and hoping to expand that work beyond 8 to now 12 states, and hopefully all 50 states, particularly during this really, really important time in our nation's history, when we're thinking deeply about the way that we are structuring systems to empower youth to make those choices with their families, and also being very, very responsive to their needs, and thinking about future workforce and economic development. So absolutely thrilled that A Life Without Limits underscores that, and delighted that CASEL was able to sign on in support of this great work from Advanced CTE.
Dana, thank you, and definitely agree about this being a just historic and pivotal moment of how we look at our systems, and look forward to hearing about some of the state examples. And now I'll go to Isa.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. My colleagues, fellow panelists have pretty much covered it, but I will say, just from our perspective at the Gates Foundation, like, we just have this belief that Black and Indigenous students, students of color, and those experiencing poverty should have access to affordable, accessible, and quality education and career readiness opportunities that accelerate their progress toward economic opportunity. And to enable this to happen, it's our collective responsibility, right? So practitioners, philanthropy, policymakers, everyone that's in the game, to ensure that these learners are equipped with key assets, right? So skills, social capital, agency, and credentials of value to thrive in a workforce and in life. And so our Pathways work specifically aims to more effectively support students in navigating key transitional points in their education journey through high school, post-secondary, and the workforce. And our strategy goal is really focused on increasing the number of students within our targeted population who are able to skillfully navigate their own career journey, right? And that means acquiring the necessary assets, being able to participate in very specific career-connected learning opportunities, and having access to meaningful career-connected experiences that will enable them to launch career paths with the greatest potential for upward mobility.
Well, that was a great way to put it, Isa. And I'm going to stay with you for this. Each of you will have your own question. This principle and its action areas are widely agreed upon, but very complex to implement. And I know the Gates Foundation is involved in a lot of different projects on this front. What do you see as the biggest push areas for the field that will challenge leaders to move the needle on learner-focused advising?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, there's a couple of different areas, but I will say a couple of things that stand out to me is one, acknowledging that there is an issue, right? And in getting aligned on a shared equity goal. That's one of the things that's problematic just across this work and across regional ecosystems, is that there isn't necessarily a shared equity goal between K-12, post-secondary, and workforce players in any ecosystem in any region. And so getting clear around who are those who have been most and historically marginalized, centering them in the work, and identifying their the barriers to access, the barriers to opportunity, the barriers to quality opportunity. So I would say that's the first thing, like identifying that there is a real problem, and elevating a shared equity goal in the region. The other thing I would say in this work is that there have been many attempts at solutions, and there are some really interesting solutions, whether it be clearly CTE programs, career connected, specifically meaningful career connected CTE that lead to meaningful credentials of value in that particular region. There's early college, there's dual enrollment. In a post-secondary space, you have guided pathways. Part of the issue is that you have these disparate and insufficiently funded solutions that aren't necessarily connected, right? So you have different players leading out on very specific solutions, and therefore hoping that students figure out their way. And the reality is that they're still not getting the supports around how to navigate those different programs, those different pathway opportunities that exist. So there needs to be, after elevating a shared equity goal, the system actors need to come together around these solutions and really identify, like, what is the path? What are the multiple paths, connected paths that support learners and students during a really, what could be a consequential time in their life in terms of moving from high school to post-secondary, move from high school post-secondary to the workforce, or high school directly into the workforce. So I think there's, I would say, disparate, insufficient resource solutions. And then the other last thing I will say is the dated narrative. We still have this dated narrative and narrowly focused pathway options that reinforce this unrealistic concept of a singular path to mobility and opportunity. So there's still this college is the one and only way. We absolutely know that post-secondary is necessary, and most jobs now and in the future will require meaningful post-secondary credentials. However, how you attain that can look different, right? So it's not just, I went to high school, then I go to a four-year. It could be while in high school, I'm participating in a dual enroll early college career tech program, have some credentials under my belt, and then moving until transitioning to a four-year or 2 years. So there's so many different ways of pursuing opportunity. And I think we need to elevate a new narrative about there's multiple paths to what's next, and there's multiple quality paths to what's next. But we have to do the work to create those quality pathways, and that's what's missing, right? They're still siloed and disparate. So there's a lot of work in terms of connecting, aligning, marrying the work between post-secondary, K-12, and employers that need to happen.
Well, that's a great entryway into my question for Nick, because the connecting systems, I mean, that's what it comes down to. And I know Achieving the Dream, Nick, you work on K-12 partnerships in an organization focused on transforming community colleges and the secondary to post-secondary path. So where do you see the greatest areas of opportunity to develop more integrated advising systems across secondary and post-secondary CTE, as well as those wraparound supports? And would love to hear any state examples or system examples if you have them.
Thanks so much, Stacy. And I agree. I mean, I was 100% in agreement with what Isa had to say, and I'll just pick that baton up and continue to go with. You talked about dual enrollment in early college programs, and those are prime examples of an opportunity to really create integrated advising systems across K through 12 to post-secondary that don't have to follow a single path, but they can go to, 6-month certificate programs that go to the workforce, 18-month credentials, 2-year degrees that they can go straight to work, or 2-year degrees that are going to transfer to 4-year university. So there's such a variety of paths that we need to make sure students are aware of. And I will say that dual enrollment in early college programs are not all equal. And it's really important when we're looking at these to make sure that we're looking at systems that not only provide students an opportunity to take classes, but an opportunity to participate in educated decision-making about kind of what their career pathway is. So early college programs that feature career exploration courses are really crucial, particularly if those career exploration courses include hands-on experiences. But in particular, I think we need to really look at who's not being currently served by either these current partnerships or the systems that are already in place. And we really encourage at ATD for communities to look at an individual level at the range of partnerships they have and make an assessment about what students are not currently part of a pipeline. And then think about making sure that there's a focused outreach to serve communities that aren't making it through the pipeline. Early college and dual enrollment programs that are doing great work, and the best examples of this feature pairing of faculty for the purposes of aligning curriculum and sharing instructional strategies. And that is really tremendous in terms of a best practice around instruction. What we think the next logical step is to arrange that those pairs so that it includes high school counselors and post-secondary advisors, and with a specific focus on particular pathways. And so right now, Achieving the Dream is doing a pilot of professional learning communities in 4 communities where we're bringing together K-12 staff, community college staff, and workforce partners to really create a seamless pathway in a particular field for students away from K-12 into the workforce. But it's crucial to make sure that this is paired with supports, because the truth is that the students who are most in need and most underserved may not even be able to participate unless we're also helping them to address other challenges that they face in their lives. And so making sure that you've got personalized support that includes wraparound supports is an important feature of this.
Well, and thank you all for your patience. Of course, the one time ever that I get kicked off of Zoom was this afternoon. So thank you. But Nick, I think I got most of what you said, and we look forward to hearing about those great pilots and all the things that you learned from that. So Dana, I'm going to turn to you. Building knowledge among career advising professionals about opportunities to build skills from technical to social and emotional learning is key to ensuring learners are fully informed about how skills connect to careers. What do you see as the biggest priorities when it comes to educating professionals on how to access and understand data on CTE program outcomes, or just about making career decisions?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I just want to underscore a point that I heard recently from a member of a workforce board who said, the skills that we're training students on right now are going to be obsolete in a year or less. And so when I think about really a strengths-based approach to post-secondary success, of course, naturally, I'm going to think of social emotional learning as advanced CTE has framed it within this guidance. And that's really about supporting students through giving them the opportunities to learn SEL competencies and skills and build upon their own unique talents and strengths, and creating systems by which we're accomplishing that. So when you ask me about really what the career advising professional's role is to build up those skills and technical knowledge, I just have to turn to both Isa and Nick, who underscored something so important. Nick talked about the value of the range of partners that you have at the table and ensuring that there is broad representation and that there is an agenda around equity in support of that. And so in the work that I'm doing in this SEL and workforce community of practice, learning from key states, we would call that coalition building. And to Isa's point, really looking at the existing data and establishing some equity goals around the cross-sector, cross-agency data is something we absolutely would agree with and uphold. So for state and district leaders, there are really several key ways to accomplish that. First, of course, is to build up the coalition and think about the partnerships, as I just mentioned, but also to develop high quality evidence-based guidance, social emotional learning, workforce preparation, and equity guidance that's complemented by high quality professional learning and professional communities of practice that promote culturally responsive programming and practices at the schoolhouse level. And that includes work-based learning experiences and looking across the range of audiences and then work-based settings where those audiences are really picking up some of those skills. States like Wisconsin have really taken a lead in this work in the past, and now they're extending that into their work with out-of-school time providers through professional learning and integrated strategic frameworks that organize social emotional learning and career and technical ed. And we're learning a lot from them and learning a lot from other states, such as the state of Delaware, who has also done a very detailed crosswalk of what those competencies and skills can look like between those two systems, both in terms of work-based learning competence and social emotional learning competence. So really excited to be learning from them. There are other really great examples in terms of measures to really document and understand more fully how practitioners are really fulfilling their SEL and workforce integration agenda, particularly relative to Principle 3. So when I think of that, I reflect on states like Kansas that has their STAR recognition system. They just recently published a digital reference guide where they're really elevating some of these frameworks and some of these practices to shine a light on high quality indicators and strong guidance, so folks in the field have some touchstones to build upon to fulfill the agenda of developing those strong competencies and skills with equity at the center of their work. So very honored, like I said, to be learning from these states, and I have other examples that I'll save. So spoiler alert, there's more to come.
Awesome. That was great just to hear those examples about how CTE and SEL are intersecting. Well, we have time for one more question. We'll just like popcorn it. So 1 minute answers would be great. And just turning back to something that all of you have talked about, which is connecting systems. And we know the capacity is one of the biggest challenges to providing effective and informed advising. So for each of you, what do you think are the top investments that state leaders should make in advising system infrastructure? And if you have a state example you'd like to highlight, that'd be great as well. So Isa, I will start with you.
So I'll share really quickly. I think there are a number of really interesting, great solutions out there. I'll just highlight is actually looking at unconventional advisors. So near peers, I think there are a lot of good examples of organizations like the College Advising Corps, a number of different organizations that are out there that are actually providing like near peer mentors, I think, and near peer advisors. So it doesn't always have to be the guidance counselor. I think another one is remote delivery, right? There are a lot of remote delivery models like digital enabled supports right now that increase access and reduce costs by removing the geographic constraints on staffing and maximum impact and maximize impact of advisor time. I would also say another is data infrastructure and use is so important. So leaning into data and analytics. So integrating multiple data sources, including post-secondary outcomes data for each school, analytics that provide info on like the best institutions or workforce data that exists, graduation rates, all of that. I think that's another way in which folks can think about advising in a cost-efficient way, yet maximize the impact on advisor time and student impact. So I would say looking at unconventional advisors, leveraging data infrastructure, and really thinking about multiple sources of data, and thinking about delivery differently. So how can you leverage digital enabled platforms to support advising?
There's a lot of innovation to be had out there, and thanks for elevating one of the action areas, which is data infrastructure. Dana, I'll go to you.
Thanks. So I would agree with everything Isa said, and I think I would also rest strongly on continuous improvement. So for sure, we see within advanced CTE's work, certainly within CASEL's work, certainly ATD and others, the value of really learning as we go, right? This is a human development science, and the career pathways are constantly changing and expanding. So understanding that continuous improvement is really at the center of this work so that we can continue to be responsive to the learner needs, adapt our advising systems, again, leveraging strong coalitions, setting our goals, and ensuring that our policies and practices are aligned to that by providing high quality guidance to the field. So we're really delighted to be here today and thinking even more deeply about the states that we've been working with on some of these examples. I mentioned earlier the state of Delaware, who has put out a really robust set of tools for these integrated practices. And a big feature of their work is that continuous improvement process and that reflective process. Isa mentioned what I would call sort of unconventional advisors or out of school time community-based organization advisors. So folks that aren't necessarily certified from a teaching credential standpoint, but nonetheless serve in mentoring and influencing roles. We want to make sure that they are also equipped with social emotional competence in their own right and recognize that as they're building up the sense of agency and belonging through and with students and the young people that they are serving through the agencies outside of those conventional settings. So very much agree with Isa and very honored to be continuing to share the work of these great states.
Well, the continuous improvement and the data infrastructure are so closely connected, obviously, and figuring out areas to keep improving. So thank you, Dana. And finally, Nick.
Thanks, Stacy. I think that efficiency and getting a broader reach is absolutely important for advising systems. But if we want to really make a difference for communities and for students who are not already on a path to post-secondary ed or not on a path to a meaningful place in the workforce, we need to recognize the fact that current efforts we're finding from families that they are not finding out about relevant pathways. They're not getting the information. And it's not that the information isn't necessarily available, but for many students and for many families, they're so busy with their own struggle. They're so busy with just trying to survive often and the challenges that they face that they often can't even hear those messages unless we are also already providing service. And so it's really about thinking about advising plus. Right, so advising in a way that is delivered so that it's going to be directly relevant to the lives of young people who are struggling. And if we want to give them a pathway, it has to be immediately adjacent to the pathway that they're already on. And so the ways to think about this are, what can you combine with your advising to make it more relevant to the students that you want to focus on? Can you combine mentorship with advising so that you can develop personalized relationships? Can you combine holistic student supports with advising so that there are other services that will help students with, you mentioned in Without Limits childcare, there's also, we know students are going to face issues with rent. They're going to face other crisis situations. Many colleges are putting food banks on campus. These are the types of things that we need to think about. And then finally, I mentioned it earlier, but advising connected to career exploration and introductory coursework. And if you can make that a part of a student's path and put it directly in their path, then they're going to encounter those CTE opportunities and be able to begin that path.
And Stacy, if I may just connect to one other point that I think Nick is making at a practical level, thinking about those individualized learning plans or individualized career plans or student success plans is a really tangible way to be explicit about that work. Leveraging social emotional learning and leveraging the sense of putting the whole child, as mentioned in Life Without Limits, at the center of that work.
Absolutely, and this is a great place to end on, of keeping the systems learner-centered and meeting learners where they are. We all want students to achieve their dream and their path, but we all know life happens and we need to meet learners where they are and help them navigate and get the support they need to get where they want to be. So thank you all so much for your insight and really connecting the dots throughout this the entire conversation. So now we're going to head into breakout rooms. Each of the rooms will have light facilitation. There'll be a Jamboard with several questions connected to today's discussion. So we encourage participants to focus on one question. You can focus on all the questions, and we'll do that for about 15 minutes. And if you can identify someone that will share out your findings, that would be great. And so please enjoy the discussion.